The biggest source of frustration in life, whether it's your personal life or professional life, is misaligned expectations. And so you have to think like, well, how do we align on expectations? And it's first, it starts with asking questions. You want to find out, what are other people expecting and what do they need from you or your team? I think it's like putting together puzzle pieces. When you're curious and you're asking a lot of those clarifying questions, you are filling in the missing pieces that were making it difficult to see what the real picture looks like. And then you're able to fill in their blind spots by sharing your own expectations and needs. So through that invitation to others to collaborate to find the best solution options, you're working together towards common goals. It could be in work, but it also could be in your personal life. How many times do we assume that we know what other people are expecting of us, or that what we expect of them? And it's not true, because humans aren't mind readers.
Welcome to Manager, a podcast about the experiences of people leaders and how we can enable them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. I'm Kamaria Scott, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we learn, lead, and succeed together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Manager. I am, of course, excited to introduce you to another great people leader. This guest was recommended to me by someone that I met at a conference, and when she talked about how wonderful their work culture was, I knew I had to find one of their people to come and join and talk to you personally about how she leads her team. So I'm today excited to introduce you to Charlene Bunting. Welcome, Charlene.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being our guest. So let's jump right in. I would love if you would tell our guests a little bit more about you, your background, your current role, and even a little bit more about the team you lead.
All right. Well, over the past 15 years, I've been working in a variety of technical roles. I've been a business analyst, a systems analyst, a project manager, a product owner, a scrum master. And for about the last decade, I've been focused on software engineering management. And despite that sounding like a jungle gym of a career path instead of a ladder, I really feel blessed. I feel blessed to have that experience, because I'm able to experience software development through so many different lenses, and it's granted me unique perspective. And most recently, as you had mentioned, my organization, I'm the senior director of software engineering at Workiva. There, I lead the regulated reporting and growth engineering teams. And to give you a little bit more color about what Workiva does and what my teams do, these teams develop technologies that help companies simplify and streamline complex business reporting. What does that mean? Basically, this includes solutions that helps folks to improve their workflows for financial and non-financial reporting. So this could be filing with the SEC, global statutory reporting, and ESG reporting, just to name a few. And when I'm not managing or leading engineering teams during the day, I've got two beautiful kids at home that I love, and I'm very honored to be a mom too.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm also a mom, and I think that having little ones is probably some of the hardest yet most rewarding and gratifying work that we'll ever do. So thank you for sharing that. It sounds like you've worn a lot of hats, and you've been kind of able to acquire this breadth of experience that lets you look at situations from different perspectives. So I love that about your background. I'm wondering, as you've had this unique opportunity and you've been able to kind of see the world of software development from these different angles, is there anything that's really permeated your experience or that's influenced the way you approach people leadership that's beneficial to all those experiences?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that has evolved throughout my career is having a mental model that's centered in the belief of being one team, right? You win or you lose together. And this doesn't mean just your specific team, but working collectively across functions as a team. I think I can better illustrate this because as I had mentioned earlier in my career, I used to be a project manager. And my mission then, when I was young, was to lead these cross functional projects to success, but I had no formal authority. So, in order to do this, I really had to rely on other people to work towards a common goal. So that's when I first realized that value of working as one team. Because if these different teams that were across functions like product, engineering, marketing, etc., if they didn't work well together, then the project would fail. And when I fast forward to today as an engineering leader, I value this mantra even more because oftentimes having that we are one team mindset, it not only helps with project delivery, but it helps to improve the way that we work every day.
Mm, I can see that.
I was going to share a story. It happened at a prior company. It was when I first started at the company. I had noticed that there were some folks in the sales and the success teams that didn't seem to have a really high opinion of product and engineering, and I didn't know why. I had witnessed these incidents where there were sometimes these passive aggressive or even straight out aggressive comments being made, and it was confusing. I wasn't sure why there would be this friction between teams. So that's when I decided to go on a curiosity mission to figure out what was the cause of that bad blood between the teams. And so this involved talking to a lot of folks. I talked to my directs, key stakeholders, some cross-functional leaders, and just started to ask questions to figure out, how do we work with these teams? What did we need from one another? Where were the healthy relationships and what was broken? And during that discovery process, I learned that product and engineering had some really major blind spots. At the time, we had just launched a new version of a product. And what was happening is we kind of launched it and then we didn't do any hardening. We kind of just moved forward and continued to build new features. The result of that was some significant platform instability issues. And so the sales team and success teams and the support teams, they were starting to see tech support tickets, they were getting escalations. They were basically taking bullets from customers. And so I was able, by having these conversations, to take this information back to product and engineering and advocate for us to stop what we were doing and help to address those performance issues, which then led to us driving significant improvement. This was really powerful because finally, these cross-functional teams, sales, success, and support, they felt heard, right? They felt like we were in it together. And that was really that shift to the we are one team mindset, working together to solve the problem. It drove to a better product, happier customers. And when we even fast forwarded from there a few years, it actually led to some significant product success where it ended up being one of the fastest growing revenue drivers for the company.
That is so fascinating. What what is appealing to me about what you said is the curiosity mission, which we'll come back to in a minute. But the willingness to, and we've heard the term before, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And so I think it's interesting because there's so many times when we do work across teams. And I mean, honestly, most of us work cross functional in some way at this point in our career. But how often do we ever stop to say, hey, what's the other person's view of this thing that we're working on? Or how does my work impact their work or vice versa? And do we even see it in the same way? So it's very interesting. And I love that you were able to take this look to say, well, what's causing the bad blood between us? I find that it's rare that we actually do that. So that's a really good point. I love to hear more about the curiosity mission. And was that sort of a one-time thing, or have you learned to leverage that more as you've gone on from that?
Oh, all the time. I think it's a superpower if you are mindful of it, because the biggest source of frustration in life, whether it's your personal life or professional life, is misaligned expectations. And so you have to think like, well, how do we align on expectations? And it starts with asking questions. You want to find out, what are other people expecting and what do they need from you or your team? I think it's like putting together puzzle pieces. When you're curious and you're asking a lot of those clarifying questions, You are filling in the missing pieces that were making it difficult to see what the real picture looks like. And then you're able to fill in their blind spots by sharing your own expectations and needs. So through that invitation to others to collaborate to find the best solution options, you're working together towards common goals. It could be in work, but it also could be in your personal life. How many times do we assume that we know what other people are expecting of us, or that what we expect of them? And it's not true, because humans aren't mind readers.
Yes. And how often do we take the time to make sure we have the same shared view of what success looks like? And so, to your point, I often think about as people leaders, we might tell our teams, these are our goals for the year, or this is what we need to accomplish. But we don't take that extra step to kind of identify, and this is what good looks like. This is what good looks like for you. This is what good looks like for me, our partners. I rarely see us come to the table to make sure we're really all on the same sheet of music. And I think we're always moving so fast that we never really stop to take that opportunity to say, are we sure we're in alignment and we have the expectation of what needs to be accomplished and who's going to do it? What the impacts could look like so we don't have those misalignments and that disconnect. So thank you for sharing that. And so when you think about going on a curiosity mission, I'm assuming that requires you to start asking questions, and that might make people feel uncomfortable. It's like, why is she asking this, or what does she want to know? As you start sleuthing around, how do you ensure that everyone is comfortable and that they are able to assume the best of intention when you start asking them questions?
Yeah, this is super important. I think this is about intentionally cultivating psychological safety. And to do that, start to set the stage that you care, right? You state the problems that you've observed in a non-judgmental way. Be curious, not judgmental. And frame up the impact of the problem. And you can also play up the opportunity if solved. And then, show up for others and be empathetic. Recognize the pain that the other person or team may be feeling and experiencing, and then invite them to collaborate on that problem solving process. They're going to be more bought in if they feel involved. And this is a super important part of the process of inviting them to collaborate, is to make sure that you are seriously actively listening. Keep yourself in check, listen to them, and really carefully consider their insights. Even if at first you may not identify with them, seek understanding. And then another strategy that folks can use is start to cultivate that psychological safety and signal safety and openness before problem even exists. How do you start to have conversations that are inviting? So one thing I do with my teams is I let everyone know that I have two rules. One is don't be a jerk. and and the second is don't suffer in silence. I can't fix what I don't know about. So please help fill in my blind spot so that I can help you, I can help the team, and I can help us as a team to solve these problems. I think the third part of it is making sure to follow through. So when people decide to be brave and not suffer in silence, make sure that you're addressing their concerns quickly. I don't want to be naive and say that all problems can be solved overnight, because they can't. But at least you can start working on a plan and be transparent if impediments or blockers are getting in the way.
Yeah, those are really great tips. And I love that you're able to really articulate a way that people can start moving towards psychological safety. I also want to say, I love your two rules. Those are two that I'm going to adopt as well. I think don't be a jerk is probably universal, but most importantly, the don't suffer in silence part. Because again, the curiosity mission only works if people are willing to tell us, are willing to share with us what's wrong. And what stands out to me from everything that you're saying, even when you talk about winning as one team and having the same view of what good looks like and going on a curiosity mission, it really sounds like you're always kind of solving for performance. You're solving for high performance and looking to see what's stopping us from getting there, what's standing in the way.
Yes. That I think is one of my passions, is how do I solve problems that are slowing the team down, that are painful in the development process, that are causing cross-functional partnership problems? How do we break down those walls or smooth out the speed bumps together? I think that's what we all want to aim for so that we can work smarter and not harder.
What I love about that is back in the day, I used to do performance consulting work. And when you mentioned that curiosity mission, that reminded me of sort of asking all the questions as to, what's happening? Why is it happening? What are we trying to solve for? And it's seeing the full picture. I think a lot of times as people leaders, when we talk about empathy, it's a term that we throw out and people want to have that as people leaders. Everything that you're saying resonates to me as overarchingly empathy, because it seems like you're trying to see the full picture of what's going on and what people are going through and actively trying to resolve whatever that issue is. So I'm wondering, does that resonate as empathy for you? And then does it resonate as empathy for the teams that you lead and the people that you help?
Yes, I think it does. I also think it's just about caring, right? Like you care about your team, you care about other teams, you care about the success of the company. So sometimes people are going to be bringing those pain points or problems to the surface, and sometimes they won't. So as a leader, it's important to continually be asking questions and trying to understand where we can drive that continuous improvement to be the balm to the pain that people are feeling. As I mentioned before, like we're just human beings with blind spots. We can't be everywhere all the time, and knowing what people's experiences are. Oftentimes, you can't be all knowing or even the smartest person in the room, but surrounding yourself with others that have knowledge and facilitating the conversations with the right people so they can drop all those knowledge bombs on you will yeah, it will. I think it leads to making things better, and it's asking questions like, "Hey, what's the pain point today? How is the partnership between our teams? Is there anything we can be doing better to help you or your team? And what would help look like?" Just having good conversations, which also leads to the relationship building. And I think it's a cyclical thing where as you build these relationships, you show your care and you show that you are willing to collaborate and partner, that there's
Mhm.
that greater level of trust and psychological safety, and it gets easier and easier over time.
One of the things that's interesting to me, and I've always heard this is, in a great relationship, you champion each other's successes and you're gracious about blind spots. And one of the things that you talk about is, covering each other's blind spots. So I'm wondering, how do you encourage your team to be vulnerable with their blind spots? And how do you help address them in a way that doesn't damage the relationship?
Well, I think that the big part is having lots of conversations, understanding people's why behind their behaviors. Why do we do things the way that we do today? What motivates you? What are your goals? And when you talk to different people throughout the organization, you start to fill in those blind spots, and then you have all these data points that you can start drawing connections to. And with drawing those connections, you're able to see a bigger picture. You're able to figure out where the pain really is, and also where are the best opportunities to come up with the win-win outcomes together.
I love that. That really does resonate with me. You're mentioning blind spots, and I think about being gracious and seeing it all in one view. One of the greatest struggles I do think for people leaders is the ability to give feedback. We talk about it as constructive feedback, but the reality is we're having a conversation, we're having to talk to someone about their blind spot. And I think that fear of damaging the relationship by sort of poking at someone's blind spot is what holds a lot of us back from even having the conversation and moving in that direction. So I love that you've been kind of able to share some tips on how we might go about doing that in a way that doesn't damage the relationship and might take some of the fear out of it for those of us who have to address it with one another.
Yeah. And in filling other people's blind spots, again, I think I have to go back to don't be judgmental and just state things objectively. Help people. A lot of times when you're having these conversations, rather than it feel like critical feedback, you can position it in a way that's more informative. So let's say maybe you have two different teams, and one team is like, why are they doing this thing? It is making our life miserable. And then you talk to that team, and from their perspective, in their world, it actually makes a lot of sense because it aligns well with their motivations, their goals, their targets. But then when they figure out what are the adverse impacts that it causes another team, oftentimes, as long as you just share, like, hey, did you know that by doing things in this manner, it is causing this to happen? And I wanted to let you know because I was hoping you would help me to solve this pain. And it is not because I'm going to hate on you, but it's because I want you to help. Maybe we can figure out a
Yeah.
solution that's beneficial to you and it still helps align with your goals, but it's not going to cause this adverse effect.
I love the way you approach that. First, I love that you approached it with a hey, did you know that? Because it assumes that they didn't, right? It gives them the opportunity to be like, oh, I wasn't aware. And it's a very gentle way to enter the conversation and then enlisting them as a partner to solve a solution. I think that works well both with cross functional teams and within a team when you're trying to give feedback. I remember being in a conversation with someone on my team about, oddly enough, an incident that happened between her and someone else on my team, and was similarly like, hey, did you know that this was the impact of the conversation that you had? I was wondering if you knew that. And, this is how it turned out. And in that conversation, she was unaware and she was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. Let me go make this right with that person, and it wasn't it was making a soft entry to the conversation and not assuming intent, getting all the information, making it easy to resolve the issue with both people on my team. So what you were saying there really resonates with me.
Yeah, I think it's important to also assume positive intent. A lot of times when these things are happening, people are not doing things on purpose to make things difficult for you or your team. It's usually just a lack of awareness.
So you're giving us a lot of good insight about how do you lead a team almost with a performance consulting problem solving approach. Are there any other nuggets of wisdom you want to share about how a people leader can go about making sure that they're leading with curiosity and they're really considering all viewpoints before solutioning?
I like to marry objective data with more qualitative feedback and human insight. So I try to find what kind of data can I pull from our systems and use that as a jumping off point to have conversations with our teams to say, hey, this is what our data is showing, but sometimes our data is wrong. Sometimes the hygiene is wrong. What insights do you derive from this data? What do you think the root cause is for what we're seeing here? What are we learning from this data? And does it surprise you, or was this what you were expecting? And then having conversations with a team so that it gets them curious. And then hopefully it will also spark that desire and passion to drive their own continuous improvement. Use those baselines, help them to create their own goals and targets, and then have that continual performance management conversation so that they can manage their own performance.
I love that. And I will say, a good idea bears repeating because you are the second guest to take that same approach. And I'm equally impressed with the way that you're both able to use data, but use it in a way that makes people feel comfortable with the ability to invite them into the conversation and to invite them into problem solving with you and not using data to kind of point their finger and say, hey, you did this and you did this wrong. And I think going back to what you said about psychological safety, that then sets up the right atmosphere for people to engage in the conversation and maybe say, what, maybe something was wrong. Let's look at it together and let's figure it out instead of feeling wounded by the conversation. So I'm very curious as to how might a people leader learn to approach things in a way that you have? Were you ever formally trained or have you always been kind of a curious mind? If you were talking to an earlier version of yourself, how would you teach or train or coach yourself to be able to do this the way that you do, to ask these great questions, to be able to problem solve and bring others on the journey with you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think my personal journey was through not just a series of trial and error, but I have had various trainings. So some include books. One that comes top of mind is a book called Ship and Self-Deception. And what that book told me was how to get out of the box. And what that means is, let me think of a good example. Have you ever been on a bus or a train and you're tired? It's the end of the day and you don't really want to people. And so maybe you put your bag on the seat next to you because you don't really want anyone to sit next to you.
That's definitely happened to me. I have definitely been in a situation where I was done peopling.
Well, then there's the opposite case where you see someone walking down and you actually move your bag off of that seat and you invite them and say, "Hey, there's a seat open here for you." Well, in the first case, you're kind of in the box. You are not really seeing other people as people having equal needs as yourself, and you're not really considering their needs. Whereas when you're out of the box, you're consciously thinking about the needs of others. That's really the key to being a good leader is continually and intently and consciously putting others' needs at the forefront. And it has many different examples of this, both personally and professionally, but it had a lot of really great tips in there. Another book that I really liked was called The Like Switch. That book is about influencing and attracting others, and it really taught me about the behavioral psychology behind this. The book is actually written by an ex-FBI agent that took the learnings from espionage and how to apply it to personal and professional life. And from that book, I learned about how you can be unconsciously sending friend or foe signals and how does your body language or your behaviors and communication impact your ability to influence and attract others? And I think that is also an important skill to cultivate. Again, because if you are skilled with influence and persuasion, you're typically more well equipped to have these conversations when you're going on your curiosity mission, but also creating that psychological safety.
That is so fascinating. I actually wrote that down. I'm going to buy and read that book. And for those of you listening, I'm going to find the links to those books and I'm going to put them in the show notes for you as well. I love the point about if you're trained in espionage and influence, what you're really trained in is to be perceptive about the impact that your behaviors have on other people and what it triggers in them. And that awareness leads you to have a different kind of conversation with people. It leads you to enter the conversation in a different way with a heightened sense of care for whether or not your behaviors are triggering those psychological safety buzzers off in other people's brains. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, with the like switch, there's this great section that tells you about the friendship formula and what goes into that in creating those relationships. And I thought that was really cool. And the bonus about both of these books is they're not textbooks, they're not dry and boring. They're actually told more like a story. And they're both also great audiobooks. I actually listened to both of them. I used to have a very long commute and it was very enjoyable. So if you like audiobooks, it's great. And I'm sure it's wonderful in the written form as well.
And I do love audiobooks, so I will find those. One last thing that jumps out at me, and again, I love how themes always kind of come up as I'm listening to conversation. At the heart of what I hear you saying is that it's really about relationships. It's the relationship amongst various teams that work together, relationships between you and your team. Do you want to speak to that?
Relationships are so important and they need to be nurtured. I highly recommend that people don't just haphazardly develop their relationships, but take some time periodically to think about, okay, who on your team do you have a close relationship with? And what are the opportunities to develop stronger relationships? And then once you have that strong core, start to circle out, expand beyond your immediate team to the teams that are around your orbit. So get to know folks that you partner with the most. What are actually some teams that you don't even know what they do and you want to fill in the gaps in your institutional knowledge? I think this equips you with a broader understanding of the organization that will help not only you personally, but will help your team because you can help to share that institutional knowledge with others.
I love it. And I keep saying I love it because I do love it. Because the point that sits with me from what you're saying is that the more that you know, and I keep circling back to your first point about the curiosity missions and winning as one team and having a shared view, the more that you know, the more relationships that you have, a lot of times your view and understanding of various things starts to piece itself together by itself. And I think about within one of my HR teams, I was infamous for being like, "Hey, friend," and wanting to know everybody and all the functions. But the benefit of that was that I absolutely understood how all the functions of HR work together in order to fully support our organization. So I know what benefits was doing. I knew what performance management was doing and talent management was doing. I was head of L&D, so I knew, what we were trying to accomplish. And so, with that, the more relationships you have, the broader the view you have of what's going on around you, it becomes very clear. And then to your point, it's easier to have those conversations about blind spots, but it's also to understand where they come from and to respond with empathy and bring people in to work together to solve those problems.
Absolutely. And the more that you know about different functions, the more you're able to give. I feel like every day I'm able to talk to one other person, be like, oh, did you know that so and so is doing this? And maybe that will help you with what you're doing. Maybe you guys should get together and share ideas on and learn from each other because it sounded like it was going wonderful in this area. So maybe it'll help you too. And then you can actually be the facilitator of new connections, not just you, but helping other people to connect.
The bridge. Yes. The bridge between good ideas and good people and helping them form relationships. I love that. This has been so great. Are there any final thoughts you want to share with the audience? Anything that is sitting around performance, relationships, curiosity, anything at all?
I think the last thing I would say is sometimes it's scary. Earlier in my career, I was much more introverted, and the idea of reaching out to someone I didn't know was hard. And so I would just encourage folks to push themselves outside of their comfort zone because most of the time people do want to connect with you. They do want to talk to you. So send out that invitation for a coffee chat or introduce yourself and make new friends, make new connections in your company's network. It will pay off and it'll be worth it, even though it might feel a little scary at first.
Oh, that is such good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And by the way, if somebody wants to make a new friend out of you, is LinkedIn the best way to do that?
I would love that.
Okay, I will share her LinkedIn with you in the show notes. Charlene, this has been an amazing episode. I feel like I've learned so much just in this short amount of time. And I want to thank you tremendously for sharing your insight and experience with my listeners. So, on behalf of everyone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kamara. I'm grateful for the invitation and honored that you've had me here.
Thank you. And for those of you listening, I want you to channel your inner Charlene and I want you to go make a new friend. Find someone in your department or in your organization that you don't know who does something different from you and just invite them to a coffee chat. Get to know them. Go on a curiosity mission. You never know what you're going to learn, how you can mutually benefit each other. And it just might be a new great relationship for you. So, as always, thank you for listening to Manager to Manager. Please share this with someone in your network. And until next time, please take care of yourself and each other.